I think in my initial conversations with Vladimir, I should have pinned down even more carefully. Look, if this thing is going to go, you're going to have to go, to China. Are you ready to go to China? But I did pin it down with him. Like I expressly pinned it. It was something I could not predict that he would sort of buckle on that idea. And it was his experience.
Welcome to Beyond the Fail, the podcast where we talk to leaders and entrepreneurs about their biggest business failures. We'll deep dive into how they overcame these setbacks, the lessons they learned from them, all to help you gain valuable insights. Failure is an essential part of the business journey, as well as being the key to success. So we're here to show you how to thrive from it. Today's guest, Andy Semotiuk, cannot be easily summarized. He has 40 years of experience in law, helping over 10,000 clients with their legal problems. He's also a former UN correspondent, where he met various presidents, including US President Jimmy Carter, and he's also served on the Canadian Human Rights Commission Tribunal panel. He's also authored 4 books, written for Forbes online for the last 10 years, and also has had stints as a newspaper journalist and TV producer. In this episode, Andy shares his experience at the UN, including meeting Mother Teresa, and the significant business and personal impacts he faced while attempting to start manufacturing aeroplanes in China. This is a gripping episode, so hold on to your seats. This is Beyond the Fail with Andy Semotiuk. Andy, welcome to Beyond the Fail. How are you today, and where are you joining us from?
I'm fantastic. I'm very excited to be on the podcast. I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Amazing. As I say, by the wonders of technology, we are connected today. So really looking forward to hearing your kind of experiences. So where did it all start for you in your career?
Well, I've been around for quite a while, actually. I practiced law both in Canada and the United States, and the particular setback that I had that I want to share with you was one that involved both countries and China. So I was a member, and I am a member of the bars, as I mentioned, in Canada, the United States. In Canada, I'm in Toronto. I'm also a member of the bar in British Columbia. In the United States, I'm a member of the New York and California bars. The experience, I've had many experiences, many setbacks in my career. I think anybody who's gotten anywhere and has a backbone has had many setbacks. I think that the way I put it is experience is basically mistakes you've made so you know what not to do next time. I think that's often what people are paying for when they hire you and they consider you experienced.
Definitely. Why did you get into law?
Oh, well, as I was growing up, I was helping my mother with various business things, and she was troubled because she wasn't very good in the English language. She was deaf. She couldn't hear well. So I was helping her, with rent payments, taxes, and things of this nature. And it just seemed to be kind of second nature to me to be involved in some sort of advisory capacity. So that's the primary reason. I also had a great vision of myself as someone who could learn the law and tell people how to solve conflicts such as, the Gaza crisis, the Ukraine war, by just telling them what the law is. I thought that if I would just tell them, if I studied the law and told them, no, this is the way it is, this is what the law says, that everybody would line up and all these crises, problems would disappear. But I didn't quite understand human nature back then when I was starting.
That's quite a big vision, though, isn't it? To have it whenever you started practicing or whenever you started studying, I should say, for law.
Yeah.
Where, not all sort of 17, 18-year-olds think like that, about solving essentially, wars and massive conflict. Where did that kind of vision and drive come from?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, you've touched on a kind of a soft spot of mine. I'm a Canadian, born in Canada, but I was raised by Ukrainian immigrants to Canada. So I'm Ukrainian in background. And you well probably know, because you're in Europe, about the war in Ukraine and how difficult things are there. And that's been an ongoing struggle for, as long as I've been alive. So one of the sensitive issues back when I was growing up was, Ukraine was under the Soviet Union, dominated by Russia. And, a thought was, well, how do you get out from this, problem? How do you become independent and sovereign? So a thought of mine was, if I could learn the law, I could, step in there and, as a diplomat, help people sort out this issue and solve that problem. So that might be the sort of kernel of what led me into the legal profession.
Did you ever try and go down the diplomat route?
I worked for a government department. Actually, it was the Alberta Department of Federal and International Relations Department for a year or two. But I realized quickly that bureaucracy was not a place that I'm very comfortable with. I'm not a minion. I don't like, fulfilling someone else's directives without sort of impact on what's going on in the process. So that led me, away from that and back into law. I also, by the way, worked for 3 years at the United Nations.
Wow.
As a journalist. So I had a very good education on how the international system works and how international relations work.
And how was that experience?
Well, I lived in New York. I went every day to the UN at 12 o'clock for a news conference. I was a journalist. I wrote articles for, Seldom News Services in Canada. It was a news chain, for example, was an agency that I worked for, and other newspaper chains. And so at 12 o'clock every day in New York at the United Nations, the United Nations has a press conference. And international leaders that sort of circle through there often come to the room where the journalists are collected. And there's a group called the UN Correspondents Association. I was a member. And you could ask them any question on any subject. And I found it very interesting because, for example, if I was in Canada and I wanted to talk to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, well, that'd be almost impossible. But at the UN, I could just saunter into the room and he'd be sitting there and I could just ask them anything. And I posed some very good sort of difficult questions to people. The kind of people, this is quite a while ago. So when I was there, I saw people like President Jimmy Carter, President Ford, Kurt Waldheim, the former Secretary General of the UN. I saw Idi Amin, who was an African, big in terms of numbers leader. Also not so good in terms of human rights record.
Yeah.
But I saw people like that, and Henry Kissinger, for example. I was able to pose questions to them about international issues and put them on the spot. It was very exciting. In fact, being involved in something like that, where every day at noon you go and you're in with all these big names, all these political leaders, you get sort of absorbed into this world where you feel that you're powerful, that you have a stake in all these international events. And there were people who spoke to me and felt, like they would have access to the UN because I was going to the UN. So there was this kind of, affiliate power the situation going on, to the point where when you withdraw from a place like that, you have withdrawal symptoms. You start thinking, well, no, I'm not so important. I'm not so powerful. I'm just little old me, you know? And a very interesting aspect of that experience is you see the actual experience, and then you leave and you watch the experience on newscasts. And in my case, because I was traveling not only in New York, I was also traveling up to Canada. I would see the actual event, then I'd see the coverage of the event in the United States and the coverage of the event in Canada. And the coverage is not always that accurate in terms of what's going on. You see the fault lines there. Very interesting.
What did you learn from that experience, or how did that kind of shape you? Because it sounds quite formative in some ways. How old were you at the time?
Well, I was in my 20s, and it was a spectacular experience in the sense that, like, I had access to the Security Council. I could go there anytime I wanted, which is the main powerhouse of the UN, where all the vetoes take place, the big powers. And I had access to, I remember, for example, attending events where Andrei Gromyko, who was then the foreign minister of the Soviet Union, was there. And because of my Ukrainian background and so on, they were very careful with a guy like me because they didn't feel comfortable with me. So, there was this sort of awkwardness about my being there. But I had the right to be there because I was an accredited journalist. And on top of that, I was a lawyer. I was involved in some legal stuff. I'd write articles on things like the law of the sea, habitat, like housing for humanity, human rights, things of that nature. So the articles were significant, and they had a bit of an influence on what was going on in the world. But what I carried from there was you're the center of your own universe. So play out your life as best you can in terms of what's happening in your world. And so in a sense, what's happening in power is not out there somewhere. It's like right here. And you can do a lot in this world, focusing on where you are and what you're doing, no matter how humble it is. It can be a lot more important than being at some big conference and speaking to this huge auditorium of people. I saw Mother Teresa at a UN conference. I watched her carefully. I learned a heck of a lesson there. And the lesson was this. It was in Vancouver, and we were walking across a plaza to go to the same building where we were going to attend the UN Conference on Human Settlements. She was going there, and I was going there. I was going as a journalist. She was going as a speaker. And as I was walking with a friend, just a personal friend of mine, Yerema Kovalchuk. And as we're walking across the plaza, he points out over across the plaza, look, over there, it's Mother Teresa. And I says, Mother Teresa, who's that? And he says, well, she's the closest thing to a saint that you'll ever see in life. Yeah. I thought, oh. So I started looking very carefully. And, she had the sister's outfit was the blue and white. And she was walking, and I thought, well, she's older. She did nothing special there. I don't see any halo or anything like that. So we walked, and we got to the building, and we spent a couple of hours in the building talking about human settlements. And every so often, she would interject into the conversation, and the host would stop the discussion to allow Mother Teresa to say what she wanted to say. And she raised the problem of, children without homes, the poor people without homes and things of this nature. And I, over time, and others started thinking, she's kind of derailing. We've got a discussion going here. And just when we're at at some point, the host would turn to her and she'd step in and talk about her concerns. I was kind of thinking, oh, this is unfair, but you had to respect her because she's a saint. And so after the meeting, we're walking out, and I'm walking with her. Like, I didn't talk to her. I didn't actually, meet her like face to face. But I'm watching her as she walks across that plaza again. And I noticed she stopped at one stage, and a woman came up to her with a baby and passed the baby into her arms. At that moment, I observed what I believe was the power of Mother Teresa. It was in her touch, the way she held that baby and looked at her. It was moving. And her life was about being around people who were dying, because she believed nobody should die alone. And I bet her touch was a comforting touch to all those people who she cared for in their dying moments. That's what I picked up from life at the UN.
Yeah, I mean, what a privilege, I'd say, really, for you to be in those environments and meet people like her.
Yeah.
Who would you say has had the biggest kind of impact on your life? Has been maybe the biggest inspiration or the biggest mentor?
Well, I'm going to mention someone, but it's unlikely you will know who it is. He was the world's longest imprisoned prisoner of conscience. His name was Andy Semotiuk. And I learned about him because one day I was at an international conference in Washington, D.C. It was a human rights conference. And at that conference, I actually met a guy named David Humphreys, who's a Canadian and who wrote the Human Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, or drafted that document, not alone, obviously, with others, but he was a key person. And it was an honor to work with him. I was a young lawyer back then, and we were trying to pass a human rights motion at the conference, and he came back. We weren't doing too well. He came to the back of the room and said, "Come on over here, you guys, I'll work with you." And we passed this motion at the conference. And I was kind of riding a high because I'd met David Humphreys. And I was flying back from Washington to New York. And I picked up a Time magazine article. I just finished a human rights conference. And in the article, there's a small note about a guy named Andy Semotiuk who had already then, this is in 87 or something. Yeah. Served 25 years in prison in the former Soviet Union as a political prisoner, meaning someone who was in prison not because he's a criminal, but because of his political views. And I thought to myself, wow, 25 years, what a long period of time. Who can survive that? I decided I would contribute to his campaign to see if we could get him free. Well, it turned out for the next 15 years, this campaign continued on, and I was part of it. Now, I wasn't the only guy. I wasn't the major guy. I was just one guy. But he was an Amnesty International figure, and by some coincidence, a friend of mine from law school ended up being his family's lawyer that was trying to get him out of the Soviet Union. So I worked with this guy, Ray Cantalon, my colleague, to help this guy get out. And 15 years later, he was released after serving 40 years and he came to Canada, to Calgary, and I met him.
How was that?
And I ended up accompanying him to the American Bar Association convention in San Francisco, where he was invited to speak. And so we flew down, and as we entered the room where many Soviet dissidents were giving evidence to the American Bar Association about life in the Soviet Union and the lack of human rights, as we entered the room, I saw them all break from the session and stand up when he entered the room looking at him. They knew him and they honored him. And he explained his life very simply. He said, I'm for freedom for myself, so long as he's not a criminal or whatever, freedom for myself, freedom for my country, which is Ukraine in this case, and freedom for all countries, sovereignty and independence for all countries, and democracy for all countries in the world. That was his philosophy. So I thought, wow, that's a heck of a good philosophy. I think I'll adopt that for myself. And he was a strange guy. Like, I took him out for breakfast just before the session. I said, what would you like? You can have anything you want, and whatever you like. He says, yeah. I said, you want pancakes, bacon and eggs, toast, coffee? No. Well, what do you want? Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. You wanted Coca-Cola for breakfast. What a guy. It's like, okay, like at his age, you want Coca-Cola, you got it, So anyway, that's a little story about him.
But why would you say that that's the standout person? Why did that have such an impact?
Stamina, believing in your what's right for you, and living the life that you believe in, even when you have to sit in jail for 40 years for the principles you believe in. He was not ready to concede. I asked him, Danilo, what was the difference between you and all these other prisoners? And he said, the difference was this. Others were willing to subordinate their values for carnal values, i.e., like sex, money, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I wasn't willing to do that. My values, freedom, independence and so on, were higher, and I was not prepared to compromise on those values. There's no way. And he sat for 40 years. Hardly anybody knows of him. I know of him. He's here in my heart. I love that man. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't perfect. But wow, I asked myself, am I strong enough to live my values, to live according to my values when things are tough, like he was? I don't know. I hope I am.
Yeah, well, and what a story and inspiration. Just makes me think. I was in South Africa last year, and it makes me think of the many similar stories of political prisoners in South Africa. That some are well known and some are not so well known as well.
Well, Nelson Mandela certainly, example.
But there's lots of others that because obviously he's the most famous, but there's so many others. So I'm kind of intrigued as to all this sort of, in some ways, political and, as you say, diplomatic sort of first half to your career, as intertwined with law, how you ended up in a business venture in China, which is what you wanted to share today.
Well, the way it happened was this. I was practicing law in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And there's a huge mall in Canada called West Edmonton Mall. It was the largest indoor mall in the world. I'm not sure if it still is, but it was back then anyway. And I had an office there, a law office. And one day a guy comes into the office and he says, hi, I'm Vladimir Talenchuk. I'm a former Polish MiG pilot, and I'm an airplane designer. And I thought to myself, well, okay, nice to meet you. And he says, yeah, and I'm interested in, designing a new airplane here. I just came from Poland, and I heard about you. You're a lawyer. I'd like you to help me with this. And I said, well, okay, but I'm thinking, some, I don't want to say wacko, but some guy comes in and says he's a world famous airplane designer. And he comes to my office and he wants me to help him. I'm thinking, sure. Yeah. I said, well, okay, well, we can get together, say next week or whatever. And he says, okay, I'll drop by next week. So meanwhile, I went to the library because back then there was no internet. And I looked up Jane's Aircraft Designers. It was the book, Authority of Aircraft Designers. I looked up Talenchuk, and sure enough, his name is in there. And there were 3 or 4 designs that he had that had been published in Jane's International Yearbook of Airplane Design. So I thought, I guess he's for real. So when he came in, I says, well, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to build a new, what's called an ultralight airplane that can be used for, for industrial use, checking roads, highways, checking pipelines, transportation in, for a few hundred miles here and there, things of that nature. And I've got an idea for a design. It's going to be called the WT, Vladimir Talenchuk 12 airplane. And I've got an idea for it. We got to set up a company here and do a design for it. And I said to him, well, that's interesting. I have a few contacts. Maybe we could do something with this. He said, what kind of contacts? I said, well, I used to work at the UN. And, I knew some people from other countries that might be interested in producing such an airplane. He said, well, great. Let's see what you can do. So I contacted some Chinese representatives and said, hey, there's this guy here. He's got this idea for a plane. We're thinking of building a plane. We've got a company going. They said, well, then tell us more. We're interested. I said, well, and I said, okay, Vladimir, we got to get it working here. It looks like maybe we can get something going. So we established a company, WT Aircraft Design. And over the course of the next year, we worked on it, and he built actually a prototype ultralight airplane. Now, ultralight is, in the airplane world, if you're under a certain weight category, you're not caught up by all these regulations and everything. You can fly an airplane ultralight. Right. I mean, there are some regulations, but it's not as heavily regulated as, say, Boeing is in terms of airplane designing. So, we fell into this category, and he built the airplane. And sure enough, it was well built, it flew well, and we hired a pilot, test pilot, and he flew it around all over the place, upside down and around. And it was strong. It was a good plane. So we let the Chinese guys know about this airplane. They said, well, come on over to China to talk about it and tell us about it. We took pictures of it flying and so on. Went to China, Beijing. There's a company called the Beijing Chengfan Industry Corp, which is an engineering company in Beijing, just on the outskirts. That was, I think, something like 10,000 engineers in it, and they led the discussions. And they said, "Okay, tell us about it." We told them what it would what it looks like, how it can be produced, and so on. And the essence of the idea was you could produce an airplane, ultralight airplane. I think it was for about $7,500 each, which is dirt cheap in China. Yeah. And they said, well, we're interested in this. We're going to come to Canada to see this airplane. So they sent a delegation to Canada up to Edmonton. And we had our pilots show this plane, fly it around upside down in circles, everything. And they watched. And they said, yeah, this is good. Come on back to Beijing and let's talk Turkey. So I flew with Vladimir to Beijing. Now, a part of this story is before we started these discussions, I said to him, listen, I'm going to contact these people overseas, but I want to know if they agree, are you going to be ready to go there and design the airplane and run a factory? because that's what they're going to ask for. And he says, yeah, sure, I'll do it, no problem. This is too big a deal for us not to take advantage of. And I said, okay, well, we're going to go to China, And he said, okay, let's go. And we went several times. So we went and we reached agreement on building a factory in China on the Chengfen Industry Corp lot. They had a warehouse ready for us and a landing strip ready for us and accommodations for us to fly in. And having signed the agreement, we flew back to Canada. And a day or two after we arrived, Vladimir called me and says, I'm not going to go. And this is, what do you mean you're not going to go? We've signed an agreement. We've talked about this. He said, I'm not going to go. Why not? Because it's a communist country. I came from a communist country, Poland. I know what communism is like. It's impossible to build, a plane in China. I said, listen, this is, I have to pull all kinds of strings to get this together. You got to go. He said, I had to phone my colleagues in New York, the people who put me together with this company, to let them know, listen, it's not going to happen. And they said, oh, this is a disaster. You're destroying, years of work together. And I said, I know, but can't do it. So I talked to Vladimir. He says, you know what? There's another designer, not quite as good as me, but there's a designer in California of ultralights. He could go and build it. So we contacted this guy in California. This guy was eccentric. He lived in the desert. I don't know if he ate ants for breakfast, but he wasn't like normal. But we flew him up to Edmonton. He flew the airplane. He saw the design, everything. He said, yeah, I'll go. We thought, okay, well, he'll save the date for us. But he wanted, I think it was $100,000 up front and, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we thought, this isn't going to work. And so it had to go, we thought it's got to go back to Vladimir. He's got to do it. And what happened was he stressed out. He had a heart attack.
No.
And he left a wife with 2 children, young children, and an immigrant family to Canada, and the airplane model, and nobody to go to China to build the factory.
So he didn't survive the heart attack?
No, he died. And so I had to live through, settling his affairs, the estate affairs. Like the big concern was how his family's going to survive this because they weren't rich or anything like that. But also the international sort of implications of this thing. Behind the scenes, later, I realized what was going on. And what was going on was this. China was interested in this airplane because it could serve as a military aircraft. You could put missiles on this thing. And you could go in, and the war in Afghanistan was going on at that time. And they thought they would build these airplanes, add missiles to them, and send them to Afghanistan for the Afghanis to fight the Soviet Red Army.
Right.
Now, there were helicopters that, could fight in Afghanistan in the war. But these airplanes, like they're $7,500 each, you could, a helicopter was something like, $10 million or some large sum. Now, it could shoot down any one airplane, but if you had like 10 of them flying with missiles, you could afford to lose 8 or 9 of them and still shoot down a helicopter. So economically, it made a lot of sense. And behind the scenes, it appeared that there was some sort of a deal being made between the U.S. and China about building these airplanes in China with U.S. aid, financial aid, I guess, to do this thing. I didn't know this up front. I didn't know that the deal was going so well.
Right. I did wonder, like, one of my sort of follow-up questions was going to be, what was the sort of the intended use for them? Did they say what, did they have an intended use?
We talked about pipeline inspection, long-distance pipeline inspection, road construction issues, transporting sick people from remote areas to hospitals. An individual gets sick, you could fly in with this airplane, land it, pick a guy up and take him to a hospital at 50 miles away. Things of that nature, of industrial, commercial nature, is what we were talking about. Supplying, I don't know what, cement to some faraway place, which was difficult to reach.
Which makes sense in a country as big as China, and particularly for the the low cost really of those aeroplanes. That contract that you signed, was that for a certain amount of planes to be built, or what was the sort of details of that contract? Was it a licensing agreement, or what was it?
No, it was, as best as I can remember, I think it was for initially for 500 airplane construction for 500 airplanes. We were to come there to build 500 airplanes, and that was the first phase. And the cost would be $7,500 per airplane built, meaning that's what we would get.
Right. So it's quite a lucrative. I can't do the maths on that, but that's quite a lucrative deal.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. And there was this diplomatic sort of background where things looked promising for things were going well. We had these good meetings with the Chinese and the American guys that linked me up with the Chinese guys in New York. Seemed to have an interest in what's going on there. It looked good in terms. We didn't know what, but it looked good, whatever it was.
Yeah,
I think we're going our way until Vladimir died. But it was hard. It was a hard thing to sell. Eventually, I had to wind down the company, and we had this airplane. What were we going to do with the airplane? So we found a group in Saskatchewan that wanted to buy the airplane for us and continue the construction, but in Canada. And they took the airplane. We gave them the airplane for promoting their business with it, to raise the money to buy the airplane. I don't remember the amounts, but I think it was something like $200,000 or some amount to buy this prototype. And then the most ridiculous thing in the world happened, which is they had a tornado on the prairies in Canada, and the tornado hit the airplane.
Wow.
Tore it to shreds. That was the end of it.
Maybe that was Vladimir's wish.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it was a downer all around. So I had to meet with all the people who invested in the project. And most of them were immigrants who put up like $5,000 each into the company. That was probably the first $5,000 they earned in Canada, because they believed in him and his play and his vision. And I had to tell them that, look, we've lost the money.
How did you approach those conversations? I mean, obviously that sounds incredibly difficult conversation to have, as you said, given the context of their kind of background and probably, I suppose not particularly high wage or set of, status. How do you approach a conversation like that? Did your kind of law background help with that type of difficult and sensitive conversation?
I wouldn't say it's law that helped me. It's, if you've got bad news, there's a few things you can do to kind of smooth the edge. One is, I believe you have to deliver bad news personally, in person. Second thing is, when you call the meeting, which I did, I said, there's an update on things. It's not the greatest update, but you need to hear this update in person. So there's a bit of a telegraph of the message that it's not going to be an upbeat message. And this is a kind of a thing I picked up in law, and that is, if you're going to deliver bad news to someone, make sure their blood sugar is high. So give them a candy or a sandwich or a donut or coffee or something. Don't deliver bad news on an empty stomach when people are hungry, because they get grumpy and they start yelling and screaming and all this stuff. It's always a good idea to make sure there's some kind of food or
give them lunch
as part of that. Once they've eaten or they've settled, they had a coffee or whatever, then you deliver the bad news. Now you may say, well, that's manipulation of people. Well, it is in a sense, but it's also an understanding of human nature and how we work as people. If I'm going to have bad news, I think I better have coffee and a sandwich.
I think I would like it, yeah.
I don't want to have the bad news when I'm hungry. And it wasn't a pleasant experience all around. I tell you, a lot of people were heartbroken by. Well, first of all, they loved the guy. Most of them were from Poland, and so they had, their buddies from Poland, and they wanted to support the guy. But it was hardship city. And I guess one of the redeeming things was that, his family, his wife managed to survive, and the kids managed to survive it. His wife worked as a piano teacher, teaching piano, and got a bit of help and so on. There was some insurance and all that. So it wasn't like a destitution, but it was hard times.
Were you heartbroken?
Oh, yeah, terribly heartbroken. I mean, my credibility was shot. Like, I had no credibility, How do you go around making all these big promises? And people invested in the idea, which I endorsed. So it was very unpleasant in that sense, but that's the case with any idea. Like, I think if a business goes under, it's usually because someone believed in the idea and it didn't go the way they thought they would. And so you do get, mud on your face. But that's the name of the game, I guess. That's, like they say, as you point out, you learn a lot far more from failure than you do from success. Hardship, I think, makes your character stronger. There's wisdom involved in hardship. You realize, don't do that again. For example, if I had to deal with the same problem again now, I would not go to immigrants with money and ask them to invest the first $5,000 or whatever it is into a project like this. It's just too risky.
But that's a human kind of thing, isn't it? That's you thinking about the human side of things as well. But is there anything that you would have done differently with the whole project? Like, because I suppose there's quite a few different variables as to why this didn't work. But is there anything that you would, in hindsight, do differently?
I think in my initial conversations with Vladimir, I should have pinned down even more carefully. Look, if this thing is going to go, you're going to have to go, to China. Are you ready to go to China? But I did pin it down with him. Like, I expressly pinned it. It was something I could not predict, that he would sort of buckle on that idea. And it was his experience emerging from a communist country, and his hardships there, that just made him think, I just don't want to go into that again, I guess. So that would be one thing. I suppose you could ask some advisors who are from the world that you're going into to give you advice about whether this is a practical idea and what's going on. But they wouldn't have known about the sort of backdoor political, like CIA, if it was CIA or American, U.S., China interest in the project, and where the thinking was on that. So the other thing is, I was reaching out from an area that I knew into an area I knew very little about. I was not an airplane designer. I had never built airplanes. I'd never built an airplane factory. So, I guess you could predict these are not going to go well, right?
But you were with someone who had some skills. So you'd partnered with an expert, essentially. You had a level of expertise, and he had a level of expertise. So in some ways, I suppose it wasn't too much of a leap, and you also had the contract. So in some ways, those might...
I found it amazing that we got as far as we did. I thought, wow, we signed a contract. We're ready to go.
And you think it would have definitely gone ahead? There would have been no sort of, I suppose, political interference that made it not go ahead?
No, it would have gone ahead. Years later, I talked to people from New York, that I was working with about it, and they filled me in on this back channel discussion about what's going to happen with this stuff. And, my eyes were opened a bit, but I sensed that there was good reason to go ahead. I regret we didn't. I think we could have done really well there.
And was there any opportunity of doing it without Vladimir? I know obviously you tried to contact the other person in California, but even after Vladimir passed, was there an opportunity? Was there any other solutions or any other way of making it happen?
Not in China. In Canada, there was, except for this stupidity that happened in Canada. But not in China. We needed a guy like this guy from California. I can't remember his name. But anyway, we needed some... See, the thing about it was Vladimir was at the cutting edge of that industry, the ultralight industry. I traveled with him to Europe to investigate. For example, we needed certain kinds of engines that were only made in Austria. So I traveled with him to Austria to the manufacturer of those engine types. And, I traveled with him looking for the supplies that were needed. But I realized quickly that he was really an expert in this field and a cutting edge expert. So it would be hard to find someone who could replace him. I was thinking, well, why not just take the drawings and build the airplane? Do you need him after you got the drawings? But you did. It wasn't just a drawing. You had to. For example, I came to the warehouse where he was building the plane. And one day I watched him break the wing on purpose to see how much pressure the wing could take in flight. Where did it, how much would it take before it broke? He experimented in that way in the warehouse. And he had people helping him in the warehouse. It wasn't just him, but he was directing all these people. So there were things that he knew about that industry that required him. I suppose you could have tried maybe with just the drawings and maybe someone who was clever and, try to reverse engineer the building of the airplane. Maybe it could have worked, but it just, with his death, it just seemed to collapse in China. They just didn't. They weren't very happy about it.
Well, I suppose the lead person had been, taken from that. So,
yeah.
Do you think that if he hadn't passed, it would have happened?
No, because he was dead set against going.
Right. And how did you find out that he had had a heart attack? Like, take us back to that.
His wife phoned me from the hospital. Oh, boy. Tough times.
How was that conversation? Or how was hearing that news?
Shocking, to say the least. And upsetting, I guess you might put it that way. It was a blow, not just, to me it was a blow, but to his family it was a big blow, and also his supporters, the people who had invested in the company. That was a big blow to them. And then, you have to go through a funeral and comfort the family, comfort all these people who were friends of his, make sense out of what's happened, and, explain what's going to happen while people are mourning and lost, what they invested. It's emotionally draining. But lucky for me, I was young still then, I could, if I had to do it now, it would be much harder for me to survive something like that than that. But then, when you're young, you could take a lot.
See, you can take more when you're young than when you're older and experienced. When you have, you've had, lots of water under bridges, as the saying goes.
Yeah. I think you would have a better world view of what's going on in life, and, a more detached and philosophical approach to things. But the resilience of the body and your emotional stability and intellectual capabilities slow down. I think on the emotional side, it would be harder on you if you're older. I notice now when I give presentations and I go into something that's moving, I'm less able to control my emotions than I used to be, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I could coast right through something very emotionally moving without batting an eyebrow. I don't know if that's the right word. Whatever.
Yes, I know what you mean.
But now I tend to slow down and have to stop here and there when I'm saying something like that. So I think that's, one of the signs of getting old.
And how did you, get through that difficult moment and recover? Because you said earlier that your credibility was shot, which is never a good position, I suppose, for a lawyer as well, and particularly with one with, UN, as you said, affiliations and reputation. So I suppose there was the whole reputational side as well as the business impacts as well as the emotional impacts. That's quite a lot to overcome.
Yeah. Well, I guess in a sense it was fortunate that my rising in stature, if I had any, was in three fields: business, journalism, and law. And they weren't in the same silo. So a blow to the business world, which is the primary place where the blow happened, was severe. In the legal world, given my work, which is, I work with immigrants. I'm an immigration attorney, U.S. and Canadian immigration attorney. Like right now, I work with Pace Law Firm in Toronto. It was kind of less significant. People weren't really tuned into, well, you lost money in a business venture. And in the journalism world, since I wasn't writing at that time, because it's post-UN experience, I burned my contacts at the UN, whatever contacts I had, that was. But, people forget things. Like, you can do the most terrible things, and 2 months later, everybody's forgotten. Not that I hope I'm not a devil or a Rasputin. I don't want people to forget maybe I do want people to forget the bad things I've done in my life, but, I hope I haven't done anything so terrible that it can't be forgiven. And so in time, things kind of settle. Like, you just, listen, death is going to happen to every one of us. Either some friend of yours or you are going to die, or even someone very close to you. Like, it's just going to happen. So you just have to cope with it. There's no way around it. And now the older I get, the more sort of philosophical I am. I realize, one day I'm walking with a guy, the next day I'm taking him to the cemetery, I'm going with in his coffin, not in his coffin, but he's in the coffin. I'm walking behind the coffin as he's going to be buried in the cemetery. That's like, wow, what the heck, but on the other hand, what did you expect? This is life. So much of this, you just have to grit yourself, ask yourself, have you dealt with people honestly? Are you dealing with people honestly? Have you done something that is shameful? And even if you have, can you forgive yourself and ask for forgiveness? And hopefully you're strong enough that you can do that. Close that chapter and, next. What's next in the life of this guy?
How did that experience kind of shape you, and what lessons did it teach you for, the rest of your kind of career, business career, law career, or just in life in general?
I'm a guy who's prepared to take a risk. I realized that, a lot of people can't handle a setback, that, like, God forbid something goes wrong. I know people who, before they travel, they have to have everything down, every place they go, every cafe they're going to visit, every hotel they're going to stay in, every breakfast they're going to have. I'm not like that. I'm Mr. Flexible. And I've adopted this strategy, which is, so long as I get what I'm after in the end, and it's moral and legal, whatever way we have to go to get there, I'm okay with it. Like, if I'm working with you and we're going to do something, that's my attitude. You want to go this way, fine with me. You want to go that way, fine with me. So long as we end up at the destination that we're both aiming for. And this capacity to be flexible and to understand that life is not all, roses, so to speak. Certainly something I picked up from that experience. And I'm glad it happened when I was young. It taught me a lot more because I was young. I saw it. The hardships in life firsthand. Disappointment is the big one. Disappointment in quotes. To live through disappointment. So makes life happier or easier. Because if you've had a hard blow in your life, everything is then uphill from there. Beware if you've never had a blow and it's coming towards the end of your life, that's much harder. But if you have a hard blow in the early stage of your life, in your career, and I've vowed, I'm prepared to talk about it. Like, even today, I'm, at times I think, I don't know, better that you shut up and don't talk about it. But what good is that, in the sense that nobody can learn from it? if you just clam it up inside yourself and lock it up. Maybe it's worthwhile to share with, look, you got to admit, I make mistakes. I'm human. It's part of my trajectory in life. And hopefully this discussion we've had may help someone else who's out there and maybe having hardship or about to face some hardship, maybe give them some insight on how to deal with it. I hope so.
Definitely. What would you want the main lesson of that to be for listeners? What would you want them to, I suppose, conclude from that, massive kind of setback and tragedy?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll tell you exactly. No matter how bad it is, the most terrible thing you could have done, there's always someone who's done something more terrible than that. Always. It'll never be you're the worst in the world. And on the other side, no matter how good you are, there'll always be someone better than you are as well. You got to just accept that. And be resilient. Bounce back. Don't give up, as Churchill used to say. I think he said it to a graduating class somewhere in England. Never, 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 never give up. It's not the exact quote, but that's what he said. That's a good philosophy. Don't give up. Just because you've had a setback here, the door closes here and another door opens there. Look for the other door. Look for the other door. Don't just sit there and wallow in the disappointment. Look for the silver lining in every cloud. There is, and in my case, I believe there's a higher power working somewhere up there, looking down on me and you and everybody else. And, this is the way it's going to be. This is the way it's working, evolving. How do you react to it? And there's always a choice in how you react to anything, no matter how bad it is. It's not what happens to you. It's what you do about what happens to you. And you choose that option. So choose a good one. Be sure to choose a good one. Like, okay, that door is closed. Where's the open door? I'll give you an example. I write for Forbes. I've been doing it for 10 years. Up here on the wall, just behind me, is a plaque. I hope we're kind of coming to an end, so let's call this a sort of final. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level of Toastmaster you could be. Toastmasters is an organization that teaches people public speaking and leadership. And I'm happy that I got this award. I had to work for it. I was a Toastmaster for 35 years. 35 years, I attended club meetings once a week for 35 years, where I watched people give presentations and then get feedback on what was good and what was not good. And I grew because I saw that. And I gave my presentations and people criticized me. No, look at the audience when you're talking. Don't say the don't use the word like. Don't wobble on your feet when you're standing. Things like this. You have to learn all these things, people, and you learn. So I don't know where I'm going with this story. I thought I had a great point for you. I guess, I know what it is. So I spent a lot of time learning about speaking because I thought, hey, the world needs me as a speaker. Well, not really. The speaking world didn't exactly open up and invite me all over the place to go give speeches. What happened instead is the writing world opened up. I mentioned writer reforms. And to my surprise, I became a UN correspondent and then a journalist for Forbes, a contributor. That world opened up. One door closed, speaking world. Another door opened, a writing world. And now there's a new world for me, that's podcasting. As a guest, like on this show right now, I'm doing something that I enjoy and I like to do. So the door opens, take it. And I was thinking, as in the area of podcasting, should I be doing this or not? A lot of doors are opening, I have the opportunity to come on programs and be a guest. And I've realized it's the world telling me something. It's up there telling me, this is where you need to go. So here I am with you.
Well, I'm glad but it also puts your Toastmasters, skills to use as well, being on a podcast, as we found out today. I would also say, in summary, thinking about Toastmasters, there's that concept of, you use the word resilience, and I think that's, such an important concept in business. But there is the concept of always looking to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable, never sort of settling in your comfort zone, and always looking to push that level of exposure to uncomfortable things. So when you do come across, a big event, a big life-changing event, your resilience is bigger and you are stronger because you have exposed yourself regularly to more uncomfortable things. And I think that's what public speaking does. And that's what, something like Toastmasters will do. Every week, you're essentially improving yourself, getting more and more uncomfortable because you're essentially having to listen to criticism and critique every week.
Yeah. I wouldn't say more and more uncomfortable, but more agile or capable of dealing with hardships. So more resilient is the way I would.
Yeah, that's definitely a better way of putting it. So, final question. If you could go back in time and erase that, tragic incident and kind of business venture and failure from ever happening, would you do that?
I'd like to say I would, but I don't think so. I think it shaped me. It helped me become a stronger human being, to be more compassionate. I think I had to be compassionate because of it. There was a life lesson there I'll put it this way. I think my view is that God gives us phenomenal opportunities cleverly disguised as problems. And that was my problem given to me, for me to get through it, to make me a better human being. And I believe I am a better human being for going through it. So the answer is no, I wouldn't. I like pain. I don't want to say that, but unfortunately, that's part of it too. So, no, I wouldn't. That's part of my experience.
Amazing. We always end on a quickfire round, so this is short questions and short answers. Question 1: failure is
lack of foresight.
What's your life's mission?
Sharing meaningful moments with significant others.
Nice. What's one piece of advice that you would give to other people on your deathbed?
Live life to the fullest. Take advantage of every opportunity the best you can. Take a chance.
Name one habit that keeps you resilient.
I exercise every day.
Nice. What do you do? Out of interest?
Walking.
Right.
Just walking.
Great. Get your steps in. If you could be immortal, would you take it and live forever, and why?
Well, I have a good answer to that. I had 2 elderly people in my life who I asked a question like that to, who in their 90s. I said, listen, if you had the chance to relive your life and change it whatever way you want, but relive your life, would you take it? Neither one said yes. They both said no. Live my life. And as I reach an older age, I understand why. You've had your chance. You've made the best out of your life. Do you want to relive it and continue living it? And I'm not sure I do. I think I'll stick with the one I've got till the end, and then on to the next challenge, whichever that might be.
If you could swap places with any other business person in the world, who would it be?
Soros. I think Soros has been doing a lot of good work in life. The guy who runs the Soros Foundation.
Right.
Someone like him. I forget his first name at them.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. Why him?
He's run a foundation where he's funded people making significant changes in the countries where they live in favor of democracy, openness, transparency, and so on. And these are all values that I share, with him. George Soros is his name.
Right.
And, so I think that's a person that I would admire. And I'd like to follow a person like that. There's many answers to that question. That's just one.
It's another podcast.
Yeah.
Is there someone you could recommend that you think I should have on as a guest?
Well, do you know who Brian Tracy is?
Yes.
Someone like him, if you've not had him on, I don't know if he would come on. He's pretty,
If you could get him on, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't have the influence there to help you on that one. But.
Okay, well, I will put the shout out to anyone that does know Brian Tracy. I would love to have you on, Brian. So please get in touch. Andy, where can people connect with you and find you?
Oh, I work at Pace Law Firm. So pacelawfirm.com, PACE lawfirm.com. I've written some books. My books are on Amazon. If they look under my name, Andy Semotiuk, they can find them, including audiobooks. And if they have anything, I work in the field of immigration. So if anybody's got any immigration issues, especially investor-type immigration or business immigration, I'm happy to help either U.S. or Canada.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes. So it just leaves me to say thank you so much for sharing your fascinating stories and everything from Mother Teresa to the UN to China. It's been an amazing kind of roller coaster of past experiences and history, and I'm sure everyone will find this as fascinating and as enjoyable as I have this conversation. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing all that, Andy.
Loved being with you here today, Jared.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Fail. Really hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. Please do subscribe to the show and leave us a review. It really does help us to grow and to reach more people. Do follow us on social media too. We're at Jeswood on Instagram and at Beyond the Fail on YouTube and also on Linktree. Thanks again and see you soon.